Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome back to the Mission Driven Muslims channel, where we strive to empower Muslims to be able to make the statement, truly, my prayer and my service of sacrifice, my life and my death are all for Allah, the cherisher of the worlds. This session is strictly dedicated for Q&A of the previous video. Great leaders are first great followers. So if any listeners out there have any questions about any of the videos we produced, or in general, please send it our way via the email or in the comments below. The two questions that we'll be asking today are related to the topic, leadership should not be sought after. But first, I'd like to introduce Brother Halim. Salam alaikum, Brother Halim.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
I'd just like to get to the first question. In our time, how can we elect a leader without them seeking it? For example, the presidential election, they must be seeking and or strive. People wouldn't know what kind of a person to elect. So how can we go about satisfying this and not at the same time seeking leadership?
Alhamdulillah, I think that there's two different issues here. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ba'd. So I think that the first issue is how do we elect, or how do we choose? That's a better word. How do we choose leadership? That's one. And then I think the last wording in that question was if we don't seek it. I think that this is what was said at the end there. And I think seeking it is another matter that we can discuss. Well, we did discuss in the video, and we can discuss it again if if this isn't clear, inshallah. Excuse me. When it comes to leadership, I think that one of the first things to understand is my personal views, based upon Islam, of course, based upon what I know. Of course, it's not like my opinion. This is what I know, and this is what I understand, is that leadership should always be ground up, not top down. And what do I mean by that? The reality is that scientifically speaking, because we have to discuss these things sometimes. Sociologists have found that people can relate to one another in groups of between 150 to 250 people or homes. And so if you have an area where there's a group of 250 people, it's very easy for everyone to know everyone. And when I say everyone to know everyone, I mean in detail. Know where you went to school, know your relationships, know what you do for a living, know your character, all of these things. And so when you have small groups, then everybody can relate to each other. Everyone can actually know each other. But the bigger the group, the less people know each other. If you have a town with 1,000, just 1,000 people in it, there's going to be at least half of the people in that city that does not know the other half of the people in that city. And so imagine if you have a city of 10,000 or a million, or a government, an entire state like this. And so the reality is that the smaller groups can interrelate better. And so leadership should be chosen from amongst that group. What I mean by that is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if there what Al-Kama called it, he said what means, if there are three of you, then choose from amongst you an emir, a leader. So one moment. Choose from amongst you a leader. And so even in this small group, you have each person knows one another, and so based upon that, they appoint a leader over themselves. And so in this way, every man is the head of his household. And if there's a household where there's for example, a single mother, then obviously she takes on that role until either she gets married, or something else occurs. But generally speaking, that's the role of the man of the house, is to be the emir. And then these households, they come together in a community, and they choose from amongst them, meaning the emirs of each home, the men of the home, come together together from amongst themselves, and they choose from amongst them an amir. And these amirs, just again, we'll say on a on a neighborhood level, they choose the amir from amongst themselves. And then you have two, three, four neighborhoods on a side of town. Those two, three, four amirs of those neighborhoods come together. And we're talking about three, four people here. So they can know one another, they can interrelate, they can be familiar with one another, see one another's progress, see what they're doing with their own communities, come to know one another. And then they choose from amongst them an amir over them. And then, just I'm using simple terms to make it as clear as I can, inshallah. Then you have the east side of town, the west side of town, the north side of town, and the south side of town, and each one of them have an amir. And so these four amirs come together, and they choose from amongst themselves, again looking at how they're doing over their own communities, and they would choose from amongst themselves an amir. And then these amirs of this town and that town and that town choose an amir over the state, if you will. And then, and it grows and it grows and it grows. And until you have an entire nation of amirs, one amir over the nation, and then what, governors over each state, and then mayors over every city or county or township. And then inside that city, in each district you have an amir, and then inside those districts in each community you have an amir. And so this is what I mean. The power didn't come from the top, and then the leader, the national amir or the president or the prime minister didn't say, I'm going to appoint this one and this one and this one. No, it started actually at a community level where people knew who they were choosing to represent them. And this is very similar to the representative system in the West, except that many of the people who get elected, nobody knows them. Nobody knows them. Even for town councils and things like that, nobody really knows them. And so what we're talking about in Islam is that it would be from the bottom up. And so rather than be coming from the top down, it's going to be built from the people, amongst the people. And the leadership would then, people would know who the leader is in front of, over them, and they would know because they're the ones that appointed him. And not only that, then the amirs appoint from amongst themselves those that they see as most qualified, and then and so on up the rung until they get to that national leadership. Now the question would be, how in Islam, how do we choose our leaders? And if we were to look at the examples laid out by the Khulafa Rashidin, by those first four leaders of the Islamic empire, if we can call it that, the Caliphate, after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then we find four different ways where leadership was appointed or attained. And so the first way was with Abu Bakr, and what we know is that radiallahu anhu, what we know is that they had a shura. The Ansar held this conclave where they had this shura, and their elders were invited. It was an open forum, if you will. And Abu Bakr, Umar, and Abu Ubaidah radiallahu anhum, they came in, and Abu Bakr was eventually selected as the leader over them. And so in this way, it was a public forum. Almost, we don't say an election, but it was a public discourse, a public forum. And the community here, in particular the elders, but the community chose the leader. And then the second way was by appointment. So when Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was passing away, he ordered, or he appointed, Omar as the leader after him. And so this is, Omar was his partner, meaning that he was right there by his side, and Abu Bakr knew him. Abu Bakr understood that this is what the people needed, and so he appointed him. And so this is how Omar became the leader, is through appointment, radiallahu anhum. And then after Omar radiallahu anh, when he was passing away, when he was lying, because he was poisoned, stabbed and poisoned. And so while he was passing away, he ordered a group of people, 10 people, and he said, choose from amongst yourselves. And these are the 10 people that were promised paradise. And so he said, choose from amongst yourselves who is going to be the leader from amongst you. And so now we have this small shura where a group of leaders are told to choose from amongst themselves who will be the leader over everyone. And so this is the small council. And then Imam Ali, and this is how Uthman radiallahu an became the Khalifa, the third Khalifa, radiallahu anhu. And then the last way with Imam Ali, karamallahu wajhi, it was through public appointment. And what we mean by public appointment is that the people realized that there was a vacuum, a power vacuum, and so they forced him into that position. He didn't want to take the position, but there was a need. And so he didn't resist either. Rather, when the people forced him into this position, when they thrust him into this position, he took it. And the people put him in this position because he was viewed as the most qualified, the most accurate for the position, and so it was given to him. And so these four ways: open council, if we can use this term, democratic, election. I guess this is kind of what it's like, or appointment from one leader to another, or through a small council of people who are already leaders or seen as leaders, choosing from amongst themselves, or the last one, the public appointment, meaning that this position is thrust upon a person. And so these are ways in which the leadership is chosen, and it should not be chosen on things such as age. The Prophet ﷺ chose Usama ibn Zayd to lead an army, to lead one of the greatest armies that the Muslims had raised at that time, and he was only 17. And many of the companions said, look, he's just a child. Why would you send him? He's not the best of us. He's not the strongest of us, and he's so young. Why would you send him? And this was the choice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this army was victorious. And so we understand that we don't base leadership on age. At the same time, we don't base it on wealth and influence. With Bani Israel, they asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a king to be put over them, and when Allah chose Talut, I think that's Saul in English, the people complained. They said, why are you choosing him? We're wealthier, we're more influential, we're more powerful in this society, we have more right to leadership than him. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that he has knowledge and stature. And so what we look at here is that when we choose leaders, whether it's through a public council or shura, whether it's by appointment, a small private council, or public appointment, then we look at things such as faith and ability, yani their skill sets, as well as their taqwa, their character. And so it should be meritorious and not about personality, inshallah. And so this is when it comes to choosing the leaders over us, then it's not really so much a matter of needing to promote ourselves. I'm the best for the job, I'm the best for the job, let's put these posters up in the neighborhood. It's not really a matter of that, because what we're doing is choosing from amongst our peers those we know to be most fit for the position. And then those leaders that we've chosen from amongst themselves, because they know each other, then they choose from amongst one another. And they're not just looking at, oh, I like this guy and he's smart and and he's a good talker or something like that. They're looking at what have they done in their own community, what is their success record, if you will, in their own community, and we want to replicate that. So the way that we replicate that is by putting him as the emir over us, or they might base it on other things, such as like I said, the skills that are necessary. So, and then again, on up the ladder, as you go higher and higher. And so this is the organic way. This is the organic way where how leadership is formed, and this is the better way, and this is the way that I see Islam as calling us to, not a public where you have a whole city, everyone gets to choose who the leader is. How can everyone in the city choose the leader when nobody knows this person? And so it should occur organically from small units to the larger units, again, from the ground up, inshallah. And Allah knows best about these things.
Jazakallah khair. I actually have a follow-up question. So you said it does need to start from the bottom up, and it needs to with small small entities, I guess, small groups of people. And the perfect example actually would be, the messages we go to, for each individual prayer. Those are actually very small. And maybe it's the case that sometimes they can be larger in different communities, but um, for if for the most part, it seems uh, it's very common that it could be the case that you don't actually know the person, or you can have a group of 10 people, for example, in a prayer line, and maybe nobody knows anybody, but they come together very frequently. So what would be your solution for this?
See, this is a whole nother topic, and I don't want to shoot this topic down. Meaning that I don't want to not answer it, right? But I want to say that it is unrelated. And the reason it's unrelated is because this is actually a symptom of the sicknesses of our times, where we're not really communities. We're not communities. Very rarely do you find a functioning Muslim community these days, except in actual villages. And the reason that I say that is because many of our communities, they're people who moved into an area due to work or something related to that, and they don't really have ties with one another, let alone interact with the greater community. So they don't interact with the Muslims, nor do they interact with the greater community, meaning their neighborhood, whether that's a Muslim neighborhood or a non-Muslim neighborhood. So they don't interact in the masjid, they don't interact in their community. And so these people, they're there, meaning that they're physically there, but they're not really there. And our communities have become hollow in this way. Almost, we say like they're dust people. Yani the wind blows them this way and they go, the wind blows them that way and they go. If they get a job offer here, they leave their whole community. It's like they weren't even there. They get a job offer here, they come here, and this isn't a community. A community should be built upon family connections. It should be built upon common causes. It should be built upon a vision, a shared vision. And really, this is where leadership comes in, is that a community should be built upon this shared vision under the person that's guiding them to this vision. And so when you go into a community, you understand this is my imam, and this imam, we all share the same vision for our community, not for the Muslim ummah, right? Because to be honest, we have visions for the Muslim ummah, and that's wonderful. But what is our vision for our community? Where do we want our community to be in 10 years, in 5 years, next year? Where do we want our community to be? And this is fundamental to ask this question. And then the imam, it's his role to actually guide the people. And it's the role of the people that stand behind that imam, because the imam's supposed to be the leader, right? And if not the imam, then they should have an amir that has this vision and guides them to this vision, and the people behind him follow him towards that. Today, we don't have real communities. We don't have healthy communities. We don't have viable communities. And because of this, we have this. And I'll go a step farther and say that many of our masajid, they're very beautiful structures. They're very beautiful structures. We have in the West here, we have domes, we have minarets, we have stained glass windows, we have masjids with the names of Allah written on the windows. All of these beautiful things that we have here, but where are the people, and where is the function, where is the, what can I say here, what are they doing? What are the people doing? Where are the hearts? Where are the hearts, inshallah? And so in this way we become, you have a board, and the board is maybe 10 or 20 people, and the positions just keep getting passed around, and the common people, they're not doing anything but giving them money. And so the money goes and the board directs where everything goes. So the real community at this point, the real community is the board. That's the real community. And all they're doing, because they realize that there's no reality to the Islam, meaning that the people are coming and they're praying, alhamdulillah, and this is a good thing, but they're not impacting the environment. They're not impacting the community. They're not impacting their space. They are having no change in the city that they live in, right? Other than bringing more Muslims. That's it. But they're not restructuring. They're not healing. They're not helping. They're not fixing the social ills. And so what do? They realize this. And so what do? They build bigger and prettier messages. Right. And so these are symptoms of the sicknesses of our time. And so your question regarding this about not knowing each other and the lines and things like that, my answer to that is, first and foremost, we need real communities based upon real ties, ties of friendship, ties of family, intermarrying. This is vital. Putting roots down, saying, this is even if I don't have work in this area, you know what? I'm going to make work in this area. Or maybe I'll leave my family here because this is my community, and I'll go work and I'll come back because this is my community. Put roots in. Actually put roots in and make this community the Muslim community that you're a part of. And so until we have real, viable, life-giving communities, then what's going to change, and so Allah knows best about these, but this is what we witness, and Allah knows best.
Jazakallah khair. Couple more follow-up questions. Number one, you mentioned the 4 different methodologies that the Khalifa Rashida used in electing the next their successor. Would these be the only 4 methodologies, or would it be based on there's some other methodology that hasn't come up yet, which would be flexible based on our time, our place, etc., etc.?
I want to start by saying that there is another methodology that we know of, and that's monarchy, where it's passed down from parent to child, and this is actually frowned on in Islam. It's actually disliked in Islam. It's not forbidden. It's not forbidden, but it's frowned upon. It's disliked. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned it in a negative light, in a blameworthy way, and so it's actually disliked, but it's not forbidden. So I want to be clear about that. So this is another way. But to answer your question more to the point, the Khulafa Rashidin, they're not sources of law. They are. The Prophet ﷺ said, hold to my sunnah and the sunnah of the Khulafa Rashidun. He also, mentioned that they are the best of generations. His generation is the best of generations. And so, in this way, they are, I shouldn't have said that they're, what I mean by this is that they're not a, Allah is the one who legislates. That's what I want to say, inshallah, to be clear. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not legislate in the Quran how to choose leadership. And so what the Khulafa did, these rightly guided leaders, what they did is that they did what they understood to be best in their circumstances. And really, honestly, these 4 ways are, they really are the only 4 ways to choose leaders. Not Islamically, I mean in general. So either the public forces someone to be leader, like the public thrusts somebody into leadership, or a group from amongst society choose the leader, or a small group appoints the leader, or somebody appoints the leader, like an individual, another leader appoints the leader. There's really no other way. However, if there was another way, then this, if there was another way to choose a leader over the people, then there's nothing forbidden about it in Islam. So, for example, democratic elections are not, they're not forbidden in Islam. In reality, there's nothing to forbid them. People will say it's imitation of the disbelievers, and this is an argument. This is an argument, but there's nothing forbidden about this in Islam. And in fact, I would liken this to public appointment and an open council. So Allah knows best about these things, but if there is another way, there's nothing saying that it's impermissible in Islam. There's no clear proof forbidding another way of selecting leadership, is what I'm saying.
Jazakallah khair again.
We'll just,
And the last question actually that we have would be, so we reach also a time where there seems to be a lot, leadership tends to be a popularity type of a contest. So mostly people tend to migrate towards electing somebody who is, the popular one, the person who gets the most, who's most likable, who's, most, I'm not sure if influential is the right word, but, it could be charismatic. That's correct. Yeah. However, so if there's a person who's not as popular, but they are the right person for the job, would it actually be wrong for them to seek that position of leadership?
And so this goes back to what we had said regarding the first question. First and foremost, at the very end, you said, is it okay without a person seeking it? So now we're talking about seeking these positions. I think that one of the first things to understand is that it's more fitting to promote other people. Right? It's more fitting that a person puts someone else in a position of authority first, meaning always prefer that somebody else takes this burden. It's not something to be sought after, and this is one of the greatest things that it's almost an indication, not just of immaturity but ignorance, that a person seeks to have this burden thrust upon their own shoulders. We look at it at the honor and the prestige that comes with leadership, or the celebrity that comes with leadership, even if it's the leader of a neighborhood. It's like, don't you know who I am? This type of thing, and the problem here is that you're responsible for all these people. You're responsible for the outcomes of your choices. You're responsible in this life, and you're responsible in the hereafter for the decisions you make. If somebody really understood that, they would run from this. They would run from it. And so seeking after it is really an indication of, again, not just immaturity, but it's certainly a level of immaturity, but also ignorance. And one of the things is that when a person matures, when a person really understands what leadership is, and they really understand this burden, then what they would choose to do is they would choose to find the most fitting person and put them in that position. And then if they feel as though they themselves are more qualified, then they would support them. And so therefore they still have a say, they still have influence, but they're not the ones ultimately responsible. And that's just wisdom right there. I think that at the same time, if you are that individual, if you're the one who has the skills necessary, the knowledge necessary, the abilities necessary, and so people put you in that position, then you also don't resist. Don't fight and say, no, I refuse. No. Why? Because if you are the one who can do it, and the people recognize this about you, your peers have chosen you, they've selected you despite you're not wanting it, and you're not wanting it itself is an indication of qualification. But if they pushed you in this and you refuse, then who knows who the next person might be? Perhaps that next person will be the person that's unqualified. But I think that one of the things that we have to understand, even with the Khulafa Rashidun, is that it got messy. It got messy. And whenever you deal with politics, it tends to get messy. So, for example, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, and I really don't want to go into too much details because I have my own thoughts about these things, so I'll keep it as general as possible. But what happened while the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was washing his body is that you had a group of Ansar who went to their meeting place from before Islam. They went to their meeting place from before Islam, and they held this council to choose from amongst them who would be the leader, and they started to argue amongst themselves. So they decided, perhaps we should have two leaders, one from Aus and one from Khazraj, one from this tribe and one from that tribe. Now it started, they was loud and they was arguing over who the leader would be and from whom he would be chosen and these things. Someone ran and they got Abu Bakr, Omar, and Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah, and they ran to the council, and there was an argument that ensued. And this argument, it was heated to where people were threatening to harm one another. I'll slam you down. I'll leave your face bloody. Your family will be bereaved of you. I mean, there was literal threats of physical violence that was taking place. I mean, we don't often hear this side of the story, but it was a very um, uh, it was a very vicious conversation that was taking place. And then ultimately, once it got narrowed down and they understood that there would only be one leader, and that one leader would be from Quraysh, because the Prophet ﷺ said the Khalifa must be from the Quraysh. Once the Khalifa, not the Amirs, I want to be very clear, not leadership in general, but the leadership of the Ummah as a whole has to be from Quraysh. So I just want to be very clear there. The leader can be from their own people. However, anyway, so once these things were nailed down, then Abu Bakr, he was about to grab the hand of Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah. He was reaching for his hand because he felt he was the most qualified for this position. Again, this is a beautiful side note that most people don't even know Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah, but he was somebody that Abu Bakr felt was the most qualified for leadership. When he started to reach for Abu Ubaidah's hand, Omar grabbed his hand, gave bay'ah to him. Then Abu Ubaidah followed in that bay'ah, and then the people in the council agreed to that. And then they went out to the streets and proclaimed it, and got the other people to give bay'ah. So here, Abu Bakr, he didn't appoint himself. He didn't say, it's me or him. He was going to choose someone else. He was pointing to someone else, and then the position was put upon him. Now, one of the things that I said about this is, where was the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? They weren't represented. They weren't represented. And this is one of the reasons why there's a division between Sunnis and Shiites, is because here the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's body is being washed and prepared for burial, and these people are arguing about leadership. Ahlul Bayt did not have a representative at that council. And so there's a strong feeling, and there's evidence to point in the direction that Imam Ali, may Allah ennoble his face, had a right to leadership at this point. But what did he do? What did Imam Ali do? And I think that this is what's important, is that once the leadership was chosen, and this is the key here, once the leadership is chosen, then even if you think that you're more qualified, even if you think that you're more competent, even if you think that you have more right to that position, then do what Imam Ali did. Be patient and cooperate. Be patient with the leadership that's chosen instead of you, and cooperate fully. Help them, strengthen them, be a source of strength, guide them. If they make mistakes, tell them, look, I don't agree with you. Judge, you have not been diminished. You have not lost your stature. You have not lost your power. You have not lost your authority just because somebody else has been called the leader. You go on being the leader. You go on being the role model. You go on being your own authority, your own influence upon people in the way that you're capable. And most importantly, you help the leadership that was appointed so that you don't divide the people. Because really, leadership ultimately is about a shared vision. promoting and moving towards a shared vision. It's important to understand that there are people who seek celebrity. There's scholars, there's people who go to Islamic universities because they want to be a world famous speaker. They want to be someone like Hamza Yusuf or Zaid Shakir, or someone like this. May Allah preserve them and protect them from the evils of people. They
Mhm.
want to be somebody that's famous on the world scene. They want to be known, and so they go to school for this reason. It's not really because they love Allah and they want Allah to love them. They want people to love they love people, they love attention, and they want people to love them. And so this is why they do it. And this is a reality, and I know it's a reality because I've met people who have said as much. The point that I'm making here is that there's people who seek celebrity, and the people around them know this. The people around them, they know this. I'll give you an example. Like I said, I met people like this. I had a brother. He had just started his studies, and he came to me and said, can you tell me how to give khutbas? And I said, yes. Don't. you know don't run from it, because you're that's a responsibility on your shoulders. And we have people who they just start their studies and they're saying, I want to start a study group, I want to teach this in my community. And it's like, see, you haven't even got your foundations yet. Why are you trying to put yourself out there like that? And so when you recognize this, and the point here is that you recognize that people want to be the center of attention. They want people looking at them. And when you see this, you understand that this is a disease in their heart. And when you recognize this, or worse, they have erroneous views. Perhaps they feel as though, homosexuality should be open in our communities, and that we shouldn't criticize. We should be, have the Western liberal ideologies about these things, or intermixing of the genders. And so they have these erroneous ideas. Who knows best except the people around them? And so when you see this, when you see that a person has erroneous views, or they're seeking attention, seeking celebrity, anything like this, again, this is why it should be ground up. Even if they're your best friend, you know them. And if you know this about them, then you don't give them that position of leadership. You withhold that from them. You choose somebody who's most fitting, even if they're not the most knowledgeable. If they're sincere, you choose them, even if they're not the strongest, even if they're not the most knowledgeable, even if they're not the most qualified. You choose them. Why? Because they're sincere, right? And the point here is that if a people choose the foolish from amongst them to become their leaders, then they're going to end up, the leaders will go astray, and they'll lead other people astray. And so the thing here is that if you don't have someone who is really qualified, meaning that they don't have the strength or the knowledge or the abilities, then but they are sincere, and the people who do have these qualities, they're insincere, or they have some kind of hidden agenda, or they have some kind of erroneous worldview or perspective about matters, political view for that matter, then what you do is you put the one who is less qualified in that position because they're sincere. And then all the other people should be there to support them and strengthen them. So the point that I'm making here, and I know I know I talk a lot about this, but the problem, part of the problem is this, celebrity seeking. Part of the problem is this cult of personality. Part of the problem is the reality that people choose their buddies to be the leaders. A good example, it just came to my mind, Shehu Uthman ibn Fadouye, may Allah have mercy upon him. He was the African Caliphate. He was the Sultan of the entire Sokoto Empire, the empire that was over all of West Africa. And this is in the 19th century. Right, this is in the 19th century. The empire. He was the leader of this empire from 1810 when it was formulated until 1815, as Common Era, obviously. And so, in 1815, what did he do? What did he do? He actually stepped down from leadership, and he appointed his brother and his son as leaders because he didn't want it to be about him. He didn't want it to be that this nation was about him. No, this was an Islamic nation about Allah and his messenger. And so he stepped down from power. Imagine a president or a ruler stepping down from power in our time, just willingly, not because their term is up, not because somebody's putting pressure on them, just because they don't want to be the center of attention. And this is real Islamic leadership. And so my point, and so in saying all of this, I think that one of the things that we have to understand is that if you're the most qualified and people choose you, don't resist it. However, when you're given a choice of choosing a leader, choose the person you think is most qualified other than yourself, and then promote them, be patient with them, cooperate with them, strengthen them. If you're more skilled than they are, right, but they're chosen as the leader, then that's good for you. It's good for you because that means that you still get the help, but you don't have the same responsibilities, inshallah. And so that's my advice. And I don't know if I gave a clear answer. I spoke a whole lot, but I don't know if the answer was clear. I hope it was, and Allah knows best about these things.
No, definitely. Jazakumullah khair.
Which is
And I have no more questions for this session. However, for those of you who do have questions, again, feel free to reach out to us by email at mission.driven.muslims@gmail.com, or leave it in the comments below, and we'll get back to them as soon as we're able to. But we also like to encourage everyone to check out our latest our WordPress site and see the latest references related to leadership at missiondrivenmuslims.wordpress.com. And lastly, and again, of course, like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And we'll see you next week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.